Now today we are joined by two of our very own SJC professors to speak to the important topic of mental health. First, we have Professor Michael Burke with us. Specializing in continental philosophy, in particular, Levinas and Heidegger, and the history of philosophy, Michael J. Burke teaches in the Department of Philosophy at St. Joseph's College at the Brooklyn campus. Dr. Burke is also the Honors Program Director at the Brooklyn campus and teaches honors seminars and various courses for it. Dr. Burke has presented papers on Levinas, Heidegger, and horror at various conferences and has published articles in magazines such as Philosophy Now and Dialogue. He is currently researching topics in philosophy of horror as well as connections between Heidegger's thought and Zen Buddhism. Now our second speaker this afternoon is Professor Magee. Dr. Michael W. Magee is an experimental social psychologist whose research centers on the interpersonal foundations of social identification and intergroup prejudice. He is interested in how the important people in our lives affect the way we regulate our attitudes and beliefs, especially when we are presented with alternate, opposing, or otherwise contrasting ideas. Largely animated by shared reality theory so far, his research has pursued the study of religiosity with a particular emphasis on the impact parental relationships bestow on the modulation of religious experience. His prior research has shown that strong, healthy relationships with parents serve as a buffer to threats to beliefs shared among families. I want to welcome again both Professor Burke and Professor Magee. We're really happy and excited to have you both with us today. So I now want to turn it over to Professor Magee, who is going to give us our first poll question.
Okay, so I need to share my screen with you. All right, so we're going to go out to polleverywhere.com, and hopefully right now you are seeing this. I would like you to join by text or by web. You can hopefully see that information there. And your answers are going to build a word cloud about what you do to take care of your mental health. You could just use your phone and text my name, Michael Magee, 390 to 37607. And then the results should start to come in. Now, hold on a second. I want to show responses. There we go. Okay. Sorry, folks. Now we're ready. I'm glad I saw sleep there. That'll be good for later. Exercise, also a good one. Very good. Friends, that's good. Family, journaling, I love that. I love how it moves around. Friends, so good. That's fantastic. Great. All right. I'm not exactly sure how many responses we have, but it has stopped moving around.
Awesome. Thanks, Professor Magee.
Sure.
So I'm now going to turn it over to Professor Burke, who's going to do his part of the presentation first.
So hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming out and listening to us talk about mental health. I'm going to talk actually about philosophical theory and way of life called Stoicism, and talk more about the sort of roots of Stoicism, and then talk about some ways or lessons we can take from the Stoics for today. So let me just share my screen with you, and I hope we can all see this. I always ask my students that, and then, in class, sometimes they're like, oh no, we can't see it. And it's already like, you're already like 2 or 3 slides in, and you're like, why didn't you tell me earlier, but everyone can see this, great. So, so today we're talking about Stoicism. So you might ask yourself, how can a centuries-old Greek and later Roman philosophy that might be more in vogue in a time of togas and prayers to Jupiter help us live our lives in the 21st century, especially in the time of pandemic? Now, the Stoics were no strangers to adversity or pandemics. Marcus Antonius Aurelius, the last famous Roman Stoic of antiquity, as well as the ruler of the Roman Empire to boot, reigned during one of the worst plagues in European history, the Antonine Plague that was named after him. He wrote a book called The Meditations, where he applied Stoic philosophy to the challenge of coping with pain, illness, anxiety, and loss. Now, although ancient philosophy isn't my area of specialization, over the past year, I have occasionally picked up some books from the Stoics and taken to heart some of the lessons and techniques that they offer, especially in dealing with stress, anxiety, and the tumult of our times. So before we look at Stoicism, let's squash some misconceptions, right? So we might hear the word Stoic, and maybe we think of like Mr. Spock, right? The Vulcan from Star Trek, who's emotionless and thinks only by logic. Or we think of Stoicism as a sort of joyless, grin and bear it affair with this mistaken connotations of austerity and the lack of emotion. So like Stoics may typically recommend that you could, bear losing your property or your friends or even your loved ones. Like one particular Stoic philosopher, Epictetus, suggested that when you kiss your child and tuck them into bed at night, imagine what it would be like to wake up without them in the morning. And we might hear a story like this and think, oh my gosh, these practitioners are so inhuman, like how could they just, think about contemplating the death of your child? But, actually Stoicism resonates much more with how we understand ourselves today than we might think. And so Stoicism today and its ideas are far more prevalent in our society. So whether we're talking about the Serenity Prayer or the works of Shakespeare, Walt Whitman, or even the Big Lebowski, Stoicism has remained one of the abiding threads out of which Western culture has been woven. The founders of cognitive behavioral therapy adapted Stoic principles into 20th century psychotherapy. Some groups recommend Eastern meditative practices of mindfulness alongside of Stoic practices. There's even a flourishing global movement of self-describing Stoic online communities, numbering over 100,000 participants in various Facebook groups, Stoicism subreddit, there's numerous Stoic blogs, there's even Stoic consultants, and of course, hundreds and hundreds of YouTube videos. There's also something called StoicCon. So that's the largest gathering of Stoics in history. So if you want to go to a convention where there are Stoic presentations. One particular model of Stoic conduct is James Bond Stockdale. He was a United States Navy Vice Admiral and a highly decorated officer who spent more than 4 years of solitary confinement in a POW camp during the Vietnam War. And during that time there, he was repeatedly tortured. His shoulders were torn from their sockets, his back was broken, his legs were crushed. He survived and he wrote multiple books detailing how the philosophy of Epictetus actually was the key to his survival in captivity. So, even if, you're a big fan of Star Wars, you might find a little bit of the Stoic in Yoda as well, right? So one question we want to look at today is just asking about the origins of Stoicism. So where does Stoicism come from? So this way of life has its origins in the 4th century BCE in the travails of the merchant Zeno, who lost all of his cargo when his ship sank. So he ended up in Athens, where he bought with his last few coins a copy of a book by Xenophon, which was the Memorabilia of Socrates. So Xenophon is a sort of less famous disciple of Socrates. We might think of Plato when we think of Socrates, but Xenophon was also a contemporary of Socrates, and he wrote a lot of maybe less exciting books about Socrates, but they were still exciting enough that they really motivated Zeno. And Zeno asked, where can I find a man like this? And he was pointed initially to the Cynics, where he studied with them. But later he went on to find his own school, and he would deliver lectures to the public on the steps of Athens' painted stoa, which is just the Greek word for porch, and that's where we get the word Stoicism from. So eventually Stoicism will find its way to the Roman Empire to be practiced in all walks of life, from slave to emperor. And the thing to really take away from this is that Stoicism really is a way of life, and its purpose is to steer us to the good life. That is a happy and flourishing life. So Stoicism asks us to direct our thoughts toward what we want in life, like what goods we seek, and to understand the nature of our desires, since we so often seek things which we can't obtain, and we try to flee evils which, frankly, are inevitable. At some basic level, there's no rational point in being unhappy about the things we can't change. So it's imperative to use our mental energy to focus on what is under our complete control, while regarding everything else as indifferent. So for those things that are not under our complete control, it's not that we stop caring about them, but it's rather we come to a deeper understanding that we cannot guarantee that these indifferent things will turn out the way we wish them to be. So one prominent Stoic, Epictetus, divides the world into two basic chunks, right? The set of things under our control and the set of things that are not completely under our control. And this division is sometimes referred to as a dichotomy of control. And it's pretty central to a Stoic approach. So what are the things under our control? So what we can control are our present impulses, our thoughts, and our actions. So we often judge things to be inherently good or bad, right? Sometimes these judgments are explicit. If someone, irks you, you might say that person's a moron. Sometimes they're implicit. Now, perhaps it's not clear what Epictetus means when he says that impulses are under our control, because this point might seem a little bit odd, right? We might think that automatic reactions or impulsive acts are precisely what, escape our control. But pulling your hand away from a hot stove and screaming is not an impulse. At least that's not the way that Epictetus is using this term. Instead, when he defines impulses, he's thinking of it as a sort of impulses emerge from the first step of thought or judgment. And so the idea is that impulses, like if we judge something to be good, you'll want it. If you judge something to be bad, you'll want to avoid it. So impulses are urges to act based on value judgments. And so from these thoughts and from these impulses comes the will to get and to avoid. For example, we might consider, an expense when it comes to buying a brand new car, right? We have a value judgment that it's good to get a new car. And so we go about and make complex plans to acquire the car. And our complex conscious actions come about from value judgments and impulses to act. So all three of these things, our thoughts, our impulses, and the will to avoid and to get, are ultimately under our control. But just because these things are under our control doesn't mean that they're not sometimes influenced by external factors like other people's opinions, like what they think, or by internal ones like our physical sensations or more automatic urgings like maybe a craving for a snack. But ultimately, they are under our control because we can make a conscious decision to ignore our cravings or to override the opinions of others when it comes to our own choices. So our will to do good and act in conformity with reason is under our control, according to Epictetus. Well, what about the sort of things that aren't under our control? Well, these include the body, property, reputation, office, basically everything that's not of our own doing. This is a pretty large set and comprises all the things external to our conscious mind. So our body can get sick despite our best efforts at taking care of it. We may lose our property because of accident or theft. You may lose your job through no fault of your own. So you may object that these sorts of things we just mentioned are kind of maybe at least under our partial control, right? I mean, it's not like the weather. The weather seems to have we can't control the weather. But what Epictetus is saying here is kind of akin to a sort of what he calls a best bet argument. That is, if you can bet your peace of mind on things that are not completely in control, then you're willingly forfeiting your part of happiness to random chance. So all these external things, from reputation to fame to power to money, basically anything subject to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, are for the Stoics indifferent, right? They're neither good nor bad in themselves, nor can their possession or loss make us happy or unhappy. It's our judgment of things which confers power on them, their power over us. But these judgments can be challenged by argument, and it can be reframed through practice and resolve. So by pursuing Stoic techniques, they can help us achieve an understanding of the goals and goods in our life that are worth pursuing. And this is the path to what the Stoics call ataraxia, the Greek word for serenity or tranquility. So we become serene by training ourselves to only want what is completely in our control. This is sort of the idea of a happy or good life without friction, a life that flows smoothly, according to Zeno. So what are some ways that we can practice Stoicism? So one way is what is referred to as the premeditatio malorum, or the negative visualization. So basically what the Stoics are suggesting is, if we fail to remember that all things everywhere are perishable, and we go around assuming that we'll always be able to enjoy the things we value, we're probably going to find ourselves subject to considerable distress when the things we value are taken away from us, right? Like, think of how, this has happened to you, where you realize, you don't realize that you've taken something for granted until it's gone. And this might be a way for us to contextualize what Epictetus is saying about, being grateful for your child. And when he's giving us our advice to tuck in your child, to imagine if your child were not there. So to ward off this danger, the Stoic recommends spending time imagining we've lost the thing we value. Imagine your spouse has left you, or your car got stolen, you lost your job or your health. Doing so will make us value these things more than we would otherwise do, and direct us to focus on the enjoyment of these things in the here and now without clinging to them. In other words, what the Stoics are inviting us to do is to contemplate their impermanence. So that even the Stoics will grieve over loss, but they'll take consolation in the fact that they've spent well the time they've had with what they've lost, right? Because they took time to appreciate its value. Now, there are other specific, practices that Marcus Aurelius, suggests, like remembering with gratitude all who have benefited him and those who he owed debts. Seneca would examine at the end of his day, everything that happened that day, and in light of the Stoic principles. But some ways to think about applying some of the Stoic lessons to our day today. Well, one thing the Stoics might recommend is to sort of cut out what we might consider to be busyness, right? American culture often values productivity, but the Stoics point out there's a sort of danger in making the most of when you're trying to make the most of your time in this way, since time is the one thing that once loaned can never really be paid back. And it's the one resource we really need to be careful to apportion wisely. And I think today our lives are becoming ever busier, ever more Zoom appointments and Zoom meetings that we have to catch up to, but not necessarily more meaningful. So the first question a Stoic would ask of someone who's too busy is whether they have their priorities straight. Are we paying sufficient attention to what is most important in our lives? Or are we being distracted by inconsequential or downright destructive pursuits? We often cram way too much into our days, which isn't a good recipe for life, or even to get things done, right? I think, especially if I think of all the days I've spent binging on Netflix, I definitely think of this kind of lesson here. So the idea then is, for the Stoics, one way to sort of become more aware of the moment that we're in now and more appreciative of it is to cultivate an awareness of death. Now, this might seem a little bit morbid, but what the Stoics are recommending is that we should plan each one of our days as if it were our last. This notion that the awareness of death gives value to our life. Like, imagine if today was the last day of your life, right? You'd probably spend it very differently, focusing on the things that are important to you, not on the trivialities. We really don't know which day will be our last, or we don't really know how much time we'll have ahead of us. So we should feel the same sense of urgency every single day. Another thing the Stoics would recommend is to avoid spending mental life trying to fix things that cannot be fixed. Don't dwell obsessively on regret. We think of all the common expressions we have that are just fixated on regret, right? Like, you shouldn't have done that, or I wish I had thought of something else, or of all the days, why is it raining on my day off, right? Like, what if things came out a different way? These are all expressions of trying to mentally rearrange what cannot be changed. We do it whether it's a minor crisis like missing a train, or a major one like getting fired, right? And for the Stoic, we'll waste endless hours obsessed with these questions and with these what ifs. But the Stoic urges us to let it go. Don't let it consume us. So ultimately, the Stoics are focusing on how to live, right? And that's what they're really writing and thinking about. So the questions they're asking are not esoteric or academic. They're really practical, right? Like, what should I do about my anger? They have lots of really interesting and helpful advice about anger. Or insults. Like, what do I do when someone insults me? How should I take that insult, right? Or I'm afraid to die. Why is that, right? How do I deal with the difficult situations I face? And all of this makes Stoic philosophy particularly well suited for the world that we live in today. So this is my last slide, I promise. But how might we become a Stoic then today, right? One suggestion might be to sort of engage in at least one or two of these practices, right, every day. Another might be to read and reflect on Stoic materials regularly, maybe first thing in the morning. But I think that sort of one of the things we can't forget is to sort of enjoy what the Stoics call the festival of life, right? So happiness is more than simply not feeling miserable, irrespective of what happens around us. that there's something about enjoying the actual festival of life, right? That life is unfolding and happening right here and right now all around us. We don't need to go to exotic places. We don't need exquisite restaurants to feel that joy. The beauty is all around us. I mean, take, for example, Marcus Aurelius. He ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen, right? And he was the most powerful person in the world. He could have any pleasure that his power and wealth could provide him, right? And what did he find charming and attractive? He enjoyed the way a loaf of bread splits open in the oven. He quotes, these unintended flaws are right and sharpen our appetite. I think of my daughter, for example, Clara. She had to go sort of do remote learning because her, school had a couple of cases. And so she spent most of her school year, and perhaps some of you also sympathize here, behind a computer, looking out the window at a nice, beautiful day, not being able to go outside and looking at the birds, and soon she became fascinated with the birds. I mean, I'm hoping not while school was happening, but, she really began to enjoy it. And that's become a new interest for her, is not being able to take full advantage of all the activities that would be afforded to her going to 6th grade. She simply started to observe everything close around where she was studying, which was the backyard. She started to focus on birds. She joined the Audubon Society, and her plan right now is to write a book called Gone with the Birds, right? So, I like to take that as a sort of indication of this idea of Stoicism, of enjoying the festival of life. So hopefully you have some questions and we can talk more about Stoicism and of course mental health in general, but I'll stop at this point. But thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Professor Burke. I really appreciated that. I had to take a development of Western civilization course in my undergrad, and we talked a lot about Stoics. So I'm sure a lot of my college professors would be very happy that I just received another mini lesson on that. So thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to Professor Magee, who's going to speak more to the psychology side of mental health.
Okay, now hopefully you're looking at my PowerPoint slide right now. Good stuff. Thanks, Professor Burke. I love Stoicism. I've been just recently introduced to Stoicism, and there's so much overlap in Stoicism in some of the scientifically based practices that I'm going to even talk about today. And it's just wonderful to know that thousands of years ago, they were really onto stuff that legitimately works. So hi, everyone. I'm Mike Magee, Professor Magee. I am an experimental social psychologist in the psychology department at Brooklyn College. I am not a clinician. I am not a clinical psychologist. I do experiments in social cognition, but that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in mental health and well-being. I am. I'm very interested in it. I've been suffering from anxiety and depression all of my life, and my whole life is really built around strategies that I put in place to help me live a better life so that I'm better, and then my relationships are better with the people around me. And so I'm going to talk to you about just a couple of those today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about sleep. I saw that some people mentioned sleep. Sleep is very underrated. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about meditation, and then I am going to show you a repository online full of practices that are scientifically well-founded and empirically supported to improve mental health and well-being. So I want to get started talking about sleep. First, if you're interested in sleep and you want to know more than you've ever known about sleep, read this book, Why We Sleep, Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams by Matthew Walker. He's pretty much a rock star now. He's done some great TED Talks, and this book is incredible. Sleep is universal, people. Every animal and species studied to date sleeps or engages in something remarkably like it. We know that sleeping occurs in animals is like worms, and that takes us all the way back to the Cambrian explosion. So we know that sleep has been around for about 500 million years. We also know that we humans are evolutionarily predisposed to sleep for 8 hours within a 24-hour period. Now, this is a really important point. The fact that evolution arrived at this solution for us was not by accident. Evolution has a way of fine-tuning things so that they can optimize the systems. This is more important when we realize that we are the only animal that deliberately deprives itself of the sleep it needs, which has disastrous consequences I think we are only just becoming aware of. Some things to consider about sleep. All major psychological disorders have sleep disturbance as a symptom. 2/3 of adults go throughout all developed nations fail to obtain the recommended 8 hours of sleep. And if you're younger, if you're a teenager, you need even more, about 9.25 hours of sleep. A lot more data is coming online now. Routinely sleeping for less than 6 or 7 hours a night demolishes your immune system, more than doubles your risk of cancer. Short sleep also increases the risk of obesity, reduces your inability to fight off infection, and reduces your ability to ward off infection, and damages the telomeres on your chromosomes, making them age prematurely. In short, sleep inefficiency has some serious consequences. Each year, we do a little sleep, a short sleep experiment. We call it daylight saving time. And every time we lose an hour of sleep, heart attacks go up by 24%. We are simply not evolutionarily predisposed to short sleep, and we are only now realizing the incredible consequences of doing this. There is a disease where you cannot sleep, and after 18 months, you die. The Guinness Book of World Records has removed staying up for as long as you can from the record book because, wait for it, it's too dangerous. And I would also like to mention that they still include juggling chainsaws, cutting fruit off of people's stomachs, catching spears underwater, and setting yourself on fire and running through an obstacle course. None of that is dangerous enough to stop it, but staying awake for as long as you can, that is too dangerous. And the record goes to Randy Gardner in 1964 or thereabouts for a stunt, stayed up for 11 days and 25 minutes. The punchline now, older Randy Gardner, he suffers from insomnia. He can't sleep. He thinks it's because of that stunt. Oh, the irony. So let me tell you a little bit about sleep that you might not know. There are actually two types of sleep when we go to sleep at night, and they're completely different from each other. One is NREM sleep, non-rapid eye movement. The other, REM sleep, rapid eye movement. You've probably heard of this. Well, they serve two different functions. The first is to remove and clean metabolic waste. That would be the NREM sleep or deep sleep. And the REM sleep, that strengthens connections. This is where learning and consolidation of memory happens. Let me repeat that. Learning happens when we sleep. If we do not sleep and do not get the right amount of sleep, we will not be able to learn optimally. And the ratio of NREM sleep to REM sleep within each 90-minute cycle changes across the night. So look at this slide here. This is a slide of the stages of sleep. And if I can turn my pointer into a laser pointer, we can see, so you cycle through these stages of sleep. These are the deep stages, 3 and 4. Here's where we're cleaning out metabolic waste from the day and the debris, and then we slip into a little bit of REM, and then we go back into some deep sleep. And you can see how the deep sleep is sort of heavily stacked early on in the sleep cycle. And then when we get down here to hours 6, 7, and 8, we're really, really heavy on the REM cycle. This is really, really important because when we get up early, when we do not get 8 hours of sleep, but we get 6 hours of sleep, we are disproportionately clobbering our REM sleep. We're losing about 60 to 90% of the sleep that helps us consolidate memories and helps us learn. And you can't catch this up by sleeping in on the weekend. If you're short sleeping 5 days a week, you are out of 10 hours of sleep. There's no way you're going to make up that 10 hours of sleep on Saturday and Sunday morning unless you're sleeping the entire day, and nobody is sleeping the entire day. So this is really, really important. It's so important to get a good 8 hours of sleep. Some research coming down the line on powers of 8 hours is affecting the start time of schools. When they move it back by just an hour, they experience lower levels of depression. They can increase attendance. Standardized test scores improve. The number of people, students involved in car accidents decrease. Cigarette, alcohol, and marijuana use also decline when teens sleep for 8 or more hours each night. Depression, sexual activity also decline. So at-risk behaviors decrease when youth get more sleep. Another study showed that those who slept 8 hours or more a night are less likely to report symptoms of depression or fall asleep in class, drink caffeinated beverages, have a phone in their bedroom, or do dangerous things without thinking. So get your sleep and stay away from electric light just when you're about to go to sleep, because our sleep and wake cycle is calibrated by light. The neurons from the back of your eyes cross over this area in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and the same light from your digital device fools your brain into thinking the sun is still out, and that delays the onset of your sleep cycle and melatonin. Okay, that is sleep. Now, I want to talk to you about meditation. I first heard about meditation and I thought it was very Eastern philosophy and it wasn't my bag, but I was wrong. And now I've been meditating more or less daily for about 6 years now, and I can honestly say it is one of the greatest habits I've ever allowed myself to pick up. Mindfulness meditation is simply an awareness, paying attention to what's arising in the mind from moment to moment, non-judgmentally. By focusing on the breath, the idea is just to simply cultivate attention on the mind and the body in the moment. I think this dovetails nicely with some of the Stoicism stuff about being present. It's really, really easy to do. The idea is just take a couple of breaths, close your eyes, stay with the breath, feel the sensations you're feeling in your body. And when you realize your mind has wandered off, you just gently let go of that distraction and you come back to your breath or the sensations of sitting in the chair or wherever you are. And you might have to do this a lot, but that's okay, because that's what minds do. They like to think. You did put up a slide, Professor Burke, that said we can control our thoughts. I would argue with that. What meditation has taught me is that I'm not in control of my thoughts. They come in uninvited and unannounced, and then they wreak havoc if I'm not aware that I am thinking. And so one thing you can learn from meditation is that most of us walk around all day long completely unaware that we are engaged in thought. And that thought causes us to feel things. And if we can give ourselves a little bit of space and we can just watch those thoughts come and go and the feelings come and go, we realize that we have a little more power over the way that thoughts yank us around. Getting started meditating might be tricky, and I would suggest that you turn to a meditation app. There are tons of apps out here. I've got 3 I'm going to recommend to you. Andy Puttycombe has an app called Headspace. He was the real deal Buddhist monk living in the mountains for 10 years. He is a true mindfulness expert, and his program is amazing. He is one of the coolest dudes. A whole different take is Dan Harris's app, 10%. Dan Harris is an anchor on TV, suffered a panic attack on air, and then decided to turn to meditation. His app is a bunch of other teachers that he's curated that help with it. And if you want a purely secular viewpoint, Sam Harris's Waking Up app might also be good. Sam Harris says the purpose of meditation isn't merely to reduce stress or to make you feel better in the moment. It's to make fundamental discoveries in the laboratory of your own mind. And really, if you want to know more about yourself and why you think the way you think, just spend a few minutes each day looking at your thoughts. All right, finally, the last thing I want to tell you about, this is a repository of lots of practices to improve well-being. It's a website out of UC Berkeley. It's called the Greater Good in Action Project. And what they do is curate scientifically, empirically supported, data-driven practices that have been shown to improve happiness and well-being. And the idea is that we can improve ourselves with these strategies over time. And so they've synthesized hundreds of studies and collected the best research-based methods to create a happier, more meaningful life. And the practices in the Greater Good in Action are for anybody who wants to improve their well-being. So I've got 3 practices I want to show you, and I want to show you the website. So I need to switch my screen to that, get that off of there. All right, so when you go to the Greater Good website, you'll see that they have a lot of practices and they're organized around different concepts like gratitude, forgiveness, empathy. Ones that I'm proud of are the 3 good things, which I want to show you. So each of these practices comes with a whole instruction on how to do it. It talks about the time required that you need it. Most of them are just a few minutes, 10 or 15 minutes. This is one of my favorite ones, 3 good things. Each day for a week, you write down 3 things that went well for you today. This is Stoicism, very positive looking. What did I do today that was positive? The why should you try it? They always give you a little bit of a link to why it works and the science behind it. And the best thing is they have a podcast. They have a podcast and you can listen to people talking about these practices. It's run by a guy named Dacher Keltner. He's kind of like a rock star in psychology. He's pretty much the go-to guy for emotion. There was a Pixar movie called Inside Out, and he was their main source there for being a consult. So there are just tons of practices here. A gratitude journal I recommend, and also finding silver linings, especially in a time like today with so much challenge going on. I think this website is one of the best. I highly recommend just going to it, having a look around, checking out some of the podcasts and implementing some of the practices. You can find mindfulness, meditations here, practices for kindness, happiness, compassion, on and on and on. Again, they're all validated and you can tweak them to suit your own personal lifestyle. I do a project based on these practices every semester in my social psychology class, and I can say without a doubt, it is the most popular project I've ever done, ever in my career, and students love it. And then they email me the next semester and tell me how much they've enjoyed it, how much they've taken away from it, and that they're still doing the practices. So the takeaway from that is there are practices out there that you can do for yourself and help improve health and well-being. And if it doesn't work for you the first time, do it again or try something else. That's my talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Professor Magee. That was some really awesome information. I learned a lot. I think that's a really cool link you just showed us. And you know, you can listen to one of those podcasts while you're exercising or just trying to even relax and take some time for yourself. So that was some really good information there. I want to invite our attendees at this time to submit questions if you have any, but I think one thing I could ask you both off the bat, I think you both spoke to how we can focus on our mental health, but how do you think we can support someone who is struggling with their mental health?
I'll let Michael answer first.
Well, there are many things you can do. First, there are professionals out there who are trained to help. And I think one of the smartest things to do is maybe get connected with a therapist or help somebody you love get connected with a therapist. Unfortunately, there's a huge stigma in our country about mental health, which is confusing to me because you break your arm, you go to the hospital, you get it fixed. You've got something wrong in your mind, you don't, you hide it, you pretend like it's okay, and you don't get it fixed. That doesn't make much sense.
Yeah.
I think a lot of families have this belief that we shouldn't be telling our personal problems to a complete stranger, which is just not the way to think about a relationship with a therapist. Now, they're not all created equal. I have had bad therapy experiences. I was just talking to my adolescent psychology class. Some students were talking about horrendous therapy experiences, so they're not all perfect. So you might not find the right one the first time, but keep looking around, because ultimately it's about a non-judgmental relationship that's not in your social circle. You're not going to run into them. You can tell them whatever you like, and in the process, help some people. Maybe it doesn't help everyone, but I would suggest giving it a try. And then the other ways you can do is just to try to implement strategies for, like I've just spoken about. You know, what I didn't mention at the top is the real 3 things to do for mental health is get enough sleep, eat well, and exercise regularly. Those 3 things combined can do wonders for your well-being, wonders. You don't think changing your diet to healthy eating do it and come back to me in 6 weeks and tell me if you don't feel better, if you're sleeping better and your moods are more regulated. This is the real deal. This is the low hanging fruit, but I think most people miss this for some reason.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, just to, add on, I mean, just from my own personal experience with, whenever my loved ones are feeling stressed out, and it's been a very stressful time this past year, especially, is again, for example, my family and I, we go out for walks, physical exercise is just a great way. And it's just a walk, and just walking with children is always a wonder, because everything is a wonder to children, they'll stop and they'll explore. And I think it's just a really nice way for all of us to sort of connect and just get away from the sort of anxiety and stresses, especially in living in, small apartments in New York City. Sometimes it can feel very, suffocating. So it's always nice to be able to sort of get out to a park or just to simply walk around your neighborhood, and we always try to at least have like 10 to 15 minutes where we just take a walk together as a family, in addition to whatever sort of individual exercise that each of us must get, we usually go as a family. So it's a nice way to kind of relieve at least some of that stress, and again, I'll just take a Stoic answer, right? The Stoic, like, when you get frustrated with your significant other or something like that, or get frustrated with the loved ones around you, stop for a second and think. Don't instantly react. Don't snap back at them, and think, and just take a deep breath and think about why they're saying this. Maybe what are the circumstances which this is happening, right? And in this way, sort of get away from those sort of like impulsive reactions where someone raises our voice at us, we want to raise our voice back at them, So, obviously this is sort of supplements, of course, to what Michael is saying, but some of the smaller things that I've noticed, and just that have helped my family and I during this stressful time.
That's great. You reminded me. So mindfulness too, it gives us that space to stop that reactivity you were just mentioning. I think meditation can help that. One of the practices on the Greater Good site is called the awe walk. And the idea is to just go for a walk mindfully without your phone, and take in the beauty. And so many of my students come back and go, "Oh my God, Professor Magee, I did not realize how beautiful my neighborhood was. I've never taken the time to just look at some of this stuff that's there." So just mindfully being in the moment outside, leaving the phone behind, observing the beauty around you. It's springtime now, the trees are blooming, the buds are coming out. And just taking time to be grateful for that really has a huge effect.
I like to look at through the eyes of a child, right? To look
at the best. That's the best.
Yeah, those are really good tips, because I'm even guilty of it myself, walking around my neighborhood and just like looking at my phone the whole time. So I think that's really important. Just being present with the people you're taking the walk with, or just leaving the phone at home and noticing the beauty around you is really important. But we do have a few questions in the chat right now, which I'm really excited about. So we have someone that asked, do you have any advice for anxiety as it relates to flying? So I'm assuming like airplane flying. Going out the gates.
Not the Superman flying. That would make me anxious. Flying with just a cape.
Yeah.
Definitely make me anxious. Oh well, that's a tough one just for flying. So my mind goes to sort of the traditional sort of staged exposure therapy type of thing. First thinking about flying, going near planes, imagining yourself flying, and doing all of those thought experiments before actually doing the flying. But getting used to flying is probably only going to happen by actually flying. Now, to try to combat the anxiety that you think you're going to feel about flying, now you can do a lot of work there, a lot of meditation, writing about it, having strategies in place to relax, breathing techniques, a couple of deep breaths, focusing on a calm place, having a mantra, that is really a lot safer than driving. It's so much safer than driving, statistically speaking. So just knowing
travel.
Yeah, you're just pretty much guaranteed to get where you're going safely on a plane. It's just, the problem is that these when planes crash, they're really dramatic and sensational, and unfortunately, because of that, we overestimate how frequently that actually occurs. It's actually called the availability heuristic, because we can easily bring the idea of a plane crash to mind. We think it happens a lot more frequently than it does. And
yeah,
so,
that's a really good point. Yeah. Professor Burke, anything to add to that one?
No, I mean, that's great. Again, yeah, it is the safest form of flight. I mean, again, my daughter was flying the first time. She gets very anxious, especially about new experiences. And when she was flying, we tried to make her comfortable, take deep breaths. She looked away from the window, right? But again, she felt comfortable, and she felt an environment around us where she wasn't panicking. And so she was able to, with, especially with her little brother next to her, she was able to sort of calm down and talk to him. And, again, she still gets nervous when, if she has to fly or something like that. But, it's partially getting used to it. And I think it is, your state of mind and how comfortable you feel when you're in that situation, how calm, you are. And so, yeah, again,
I think it's also worth adding that almost everybody on the plane is a little nervous, even if you fly all the time.
Right.
It makes you a little nervous. It's just knowing that other people are probably hiding it, but everybody's a little nervous flying.
Yeah, great points. Then we have a question from Andrew. How does one appear non-judgmental?
I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. But my wife will tell you.
Well, we don't want to seem non-judgmental. We want to be non-judgmental, right? And
Right,
to take our motto to heart, right?
Andrew really just wants to seem non-judgmental.
Yeah.
That takes practice. It takes practice to have equanimity and balance in the mind. Psychology is my game, and I actually say to my students all the time, I don't think we're neutral about anything. I don't think neutrality exists. So I'm going to say that actually I think we're all biased all the time, which is kind of related to being judgmental. So there's a normal aspect to it within a normal range. I think. But you can get a little space between you and that judgment before it lands, then I think you'll be better at appearing less judgmental.
Right. To sort of, to sort of develop or almost sort of engage in the habit of not simply flying off the handle whenever you hear something that you might disagree with, right? And that can take time, that's a habit that you have to build up and you have to practice over time,
Yeah.
But again, it's to be as best as we can, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that our motto?
That is, esse non bidere.
How do we work that into this webinar? Amazing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think just going off of your points, listening is really, really key. So being able to dialogue with people you have differences with and listening to what people have to say is key, to trying not to be biased and trying to not be judgmental. Okay. Oh, Andrew gave us a comment and he said, I see. Thank you, Andrew, for that question. Then we have one more question here from Sarah. What do you do when the reason you need help is the same thing that prevents you from being able to get help? For example, depression sapping the energy you would need to implement any of these life changes, or anxiety turning to meditation into something stressful. It's a really good question.
That's a great question. That's a really good question. I don't have a magic bullet answer for that, other than sometimes we have to brute force ourselves and fake it till we make it. And sometimes the beginning is going to feel really false and fake. And I would just say, sit in that discomfort and just try to march 1 foot forward, one moment at a time, toward your goal. And it is very challenging. I know this firsthand. My daughter suffers a lot from depression, and we've talked about this exact thing. Like, I say, well, you could do this. Well, I don't want to. I can't get off the couch. So I definitely know how that is. And my advice is to just don't give up. Don't give up on yourself. Make goals and figure out maybe little steps you can work toward the goal. If you break up a large thing into tinier steps, it seems less overwhelming. And maybe start smaller first. And like meditating can be hard. So start for 30 seconds, a minute. Do it a minute a day for a week. And then the next week, add another minute, maybe. Just take it very, very, very slowly. Even meditating for a minute helps.
Right.
Right. Don't let the better be the enemy of the good. Right. Exactly.
Oh, I like
It's not mine, but I'll take it. But Michael, especially as you brought up your experience, what would you say about like the value of then support networks and people around you trying to help you in this regards, right? And you're, for example, helping your daughter or...
They're invaluable. Support is invaluable. I mean, that's really it. That can make or break a person's success at recovery or well-being. It's true. So yeah, it's so important. Good support group, family, friends, or therapists, or teachers, or priests, other leaders. You know, it doesn't. Anybody can be a support groups. We have groups you can just go for just that reason, to get support.
Mm-hmm.
But human connection definitely helps. We thrive on human connection.
Right. And I think that's what's been so difficult during a time of isolation, right? With COVID, I think everyone's been feeling that in some way, and even if you felt it beforehand, it's even more pronounced at this point. So
it's true, but I've also found, interestingly enough, I've been, you know, sometimes the stressful situations can also highlight what's really important in your life, and you know what you've taken for granted prior. You know, I found that I've had very close relationships with some of my friends since childhood, and we have used COVID and our unemployments or, you know, quarantines to reconnect. And so, you know, we will try to have like a 6-7 hour Zoom session every week, you know, just my wife hates it, but, you know, just to get together, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's been really difficult on some friendships, and especially the sort of casual acquaintances in everyday work life. I've forgotten how much I missed out on that sort of stuff.
right.
You know, just like running into Michael in a hallway and just being able to kind of like, pardon my French, shoot the shit, or just, you know, just explain pleasantries, you know, or complain about something together, right? And that's hard, and I really miss that, you know. And then in other ways, it's strange enough that a lot more opportunities have opened up. Like, I've been able to spend a ton of time with my kids that I otherwise would never have spent, because I'd be in, you know, my office or be teaching. And so, you know, in between classes, I'll get up, get another cup of coffee, and poke my head in the kids. You doing your work, you know, or at least just to talk to them for a few minutes. And so it is interesting that I agree, you know, obviously there is a lot that we've, you know, we're missing out of because of this, but there's these unexpected joys.
Yeah, I totally agree with that too, for sure. I think, oh, we have one more question here from Glory Marie. I hope I'm saying that correctly. What can be done if you suffer from high functioning depression and anxiety? Do either of you have any advice about that?
None that hasn't already really been covered. So the high functioning depression and anxiety, I'm one of them. We walk among you, hiding our unease and our depression, and seem like everything's okay. But again, all of the things mentioned, taking regular exercise, making sure you're sleeping enough, engaging in some well-being strategies, and maybe therapy, talking to a therapist. And in some cases, medication is also appropriate. So.
Great. So I want to be mindful of time here. And I know Neil is going to launch one final poll question for all of our attendees, but thank you to everyone who really was vulnerable and open in the question and answer chat. We really appreciate that, and are always open to continue this type of discussion. So this is our final poll question of the afternoon. After hearing this presentation, have you learned new ways to take care of your mental health going forward? Seems that most people say yes. We have a few skeptics, which is totally fine. That's good.
Another way of life in ancient
That's right.
Yeah.
Do we have any Stoics?
Okay, great.
I love that you didn't give them a no choice. That's good for our egos.
So one more thing I'm going to ask Neil to do before we close and share the results out to you. We were commentating on the results as they came in, is to demo our new virtual platform, SJC NY Connect, which I mentioned in the beginning. So he will briefly do that before 5 o'clock hits. I promise.
Great, thanks, Allison. And as soon as I'm done with the demo, you can share the results as well.
Correct.
Okay, everyone, I'm just going to share my screen. One moment. Okay, so when you initially sign into SJC NY Connect, this is the home screen that you get. As you can see, this is the feed right here. Allison made a post regarding her gala that's coming up in the fall. As well, this platform, as we mentioned, is the main focus to engage, exchange, and empower alums with each other. To the left here, you'll see a directory which has all of our everyone that's signed on. It's part of it. So if you see this little tab right here, willing to help, that means a person is willing to be a mentor. Okay, so all these right here, this little yellowish tab, that means that the person is willing to be a mentor. Okay, if you to the other tab right here, the mentoring, it's broken down accordingly to different fields and so forth. So it fits to whoever is looking for a mentor within marketing, accounting, finance, education, and so forth. As well as there's a jobs tab where you'll see the latest jobs that's been posted from our career development offices as well. And you could browse through all of them as well. There's a photo section from some of our previous events. If you want to take a peek at that, we have the groups. Right now we have career development as one of our main focus. And there's Brooklyn Bears Athletics, Chapel Players, the Long Island Golden Eagle Athletics, and the Virtual Knitting Club, who Allison, by the way, is in charge of as well. And then, of course, there's the events section right here. So it has all of the events that's coming up this week. As we mentioned, is our Brooklyn Bears Spirit Fest, and these are all the events that we have planned. So if you're interested, well, if whoever's logged in and able to have access to this will have access to all of these events too as well. So if you have any questions regarding the platform, feel free to reach out to Allison or myself. And that's about it.
Awesome, thanks, Neil.
Yep.
So now we're just going to share those results to all of you so you can see that. So I'm really happy that a lot of you, felt that you learned some new ways to take care of your mental health going forward. I think it's important to learn something new every day, and I think we definitely did that here today. And I just want to thank both Professor Burke and Professor Magee for their time today and all the information they shared with us. We really appreciate you speaking with us. And then to our attendees, I just want to thank you all for your time, and just to be on the lookout for a thank you email from the Alumni office with a link to our events page and SJC NY Connect. So I hope you can enjoy the beautiful weather today, take care of your mental health, and continue to stay healthy throughout this time. Have a good day, everyone. Bye all.